Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of The Daily Prompt. Happy Wednesday. We are currently in the process of reverse engineering the complete creative process from idea to story to screenplay to the deal. This is episode number 3 of that. On Monday, we looked at the end of the process, which is how to sell your screenplay, how to get a completed, aligned screenplay into the hands of a producer or agent or someone who is going to be able to say yes to it, hook them in, pull them in, get them to read your project. Obviously, there's a lot more to go into with all that. We'll dig into the details of it as we go along. Can't do everything in one episode. Sorry, everybody. And then yesterday we talked about alignment. We talked about how in order to actually get your project into someone's hands and actually get a yes out of them, you need to make sure that that project is aligned with their immediate needs. It's literally the alignment that's going to make or break your chances of actually getting a deal. So how do you get alignment? Well, you send your work out for notes and feedback. You learn how to decipher and interpret the notes and use that as a way to help you understand how your project is actually landing with the reader. So if you understand how your project is landing with the reader, it's not quite landing quite right, you can adjust and modify your project so that it actually does land with the reader the way you want it to land with the reader. Remember, it's not about changing what you've written because someone gave you notes or feedback and so you got to change it to whatever that is. It's about understanding what their expectations were and whether you hit or missed what you were going for based upon what their expectations were. So when you get feedback, you get to see this is what someone expected to get out of or wanted to get out of my story. What do I want them to get out of the story? And how do I adjust and adapt my story so that it actually gives that reader the experience that they want? Now, let me give you a little a bit of advice about getting notes and feedback. One of the biggest challenges for young, new, beginner type level writers, whatever age you are, one of the biggest challenges is for you to actually get feedback in the first place. Partly because, no offense, but people probably don't want to read your script and give you the feedback for it. Partly because giving feedback is difficult. Giving feedback is a skill in itself. I believe it's a skill you should learn, which is why it's part of understanding the whole process itself, is learning how to give notes so that it helps the person who's writing. Most people don't know how to do that. And because they don't know how to do that, a lot of the notes that you get back are not going to be terribly enthusiastic. They might be very vague. They might not really be all that helpful. One of the ways you're going to get better feedback is if you actually send out better scripts. I started doing the series last year, which I'm hoping to resume again at some point if time permits, called The Feedback Loop. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Maybe I'll see if I'll put a link to it on somewhere here. Basically what we did was we looked at the first 3 pages of like 12 different writers' projects over 12 different episodes and did a deep dive on what someone like me is thinking as you're going through the feedback process. Now, one of the things that I quickly realized is that, and this is years and years ago, is that the further along a writer is, the more advanced a writer is, the deeper I can go with my notes. If a writer is a beginner and they've made some very, very basic mistakes, formatting mistakes or storytelling or story revealing mistakes, at the end of the day, I have to talk about surface level stuff. I have to talk about silly things like formatting or how story plays out, or just the simple way that you reveal a scene in a screenplay. Those kinds of things are pretty basic. And again, we'll touch on some of that stuff later in this series as well. But you know, if you have written something that is spot on, that is professional caliber, that's crisp, that's clean, that's succinct, that pulls the reader through a visual story, all the stuff. If you've done that, then someone who's giving you notes can see a more clear picture. And the notes that they're going to give you are not based just on the simple surface level stuff. They're actually based upon the story level stuff, or how the story affected them, or the characters, or the nuances, or the scene choices maybe that you've made along the way, and whether those scene choices are actually building to what they'd expected or what they wanted or what they thought you were going to do. The point is, when you send your work anywhere, what you need and want your project to be is what I call a page turner screenplay. Now, the name of this channel is Fast Screenplay. The system I built is Fast Screenplay. People often think that means a screenplay that you bang out really quickly in a month or so. That's not what that means at all. A fast screenplay is a page turner screenplay, a screenplay that reads fast, a screenplay that when you pick it up, you cannot put that thing down. Here's why you want, need, and must write a fast screenplay. The reason is because when someone picks up your screenplay, if they start reading the first page, 2, 5, 10, and it becomes a chore and it becomes like they're having to figure out what you're trying to say. They're not really clear on who's who or what people's motivations are or what is this imagery you're trying to describe. And if it becomes slow and laborious and challenging and difficult slog to get through, what's going to end up happening is they're not going to want to read any more of your story. And I have read thousands of screenplays that meet that description. You know literally by page 2 what you're in for from a writing level standpoint. A fast screenplay, on the other hand, is a screenplay that when the first words draw the reader in, as soon as those words draw the reader in, they pull the reader down the page. They want to know who this is. What's going on here? This is fascinating. Tell me more. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Whoa. You're giving the reader the emotional experience of the screen story that we're ultimately going to watch on the screen or on the screen, whatever size screen the stories that we're going to be making are for these days. So to master the art of writing a page turner, ultimately production ready screenplay, something that if I get the screenplay in my hands and I just blast through it because it's extraordinary and it's pulling me through this journey and this adventure, at the end of it I go, I could shoot this right now. This is ready to go. I don't need to do any further development on this. I have an idea of how to cast this. I have an idea where the costs are going to go. I can see how I could sell this thing. Bang. You have something that a producer can say yes to. Now, whether you're ready to send it out to producers or not, when you send a project like that out to some reader for notes, whether that's your mom or whether that's your cousin or whether that's your friend, or whether it's some paid service, whatever it is, if you're sending something like that out, you're going to get better feedback. And by better feedback, I don't necessarily mean that they're going to love it. I mean that what they're going to be able to give you is much more clear and distinct feedback that you can then use to align so that it lands the way that you want it to land. So let's take a look at this sort of process so far, right? Reverse engineering this thing. If you think about the sales part of the process, you think about the fact that you have to connect with the producer. You have to hook them, you have to draw them in, and then you have to exceed their expectations. How do you do that? You make sure that your project is aligned with that target before you ever even try to reach out to contact them. So now let's say, okay, how do we do that? Well, we have to make sure that we send out for feedback an extraordinary page turner screenplay that when the reader gives you notes, they're giving you the deeper notes so that you know how to tweak and adjust that so that it's going to land with the reader the way you want it to land with the reader. If you can do that, then you can capture that producer's attention, right? You can excite, forget about trying to sell to a producer. Think about the team. Think about the people who are then going to go, this is a great film, let's make this. That could be a director who reads your script and goes, oh my God, I want to make this, I got to make this. And now that person's going to go out and try to find a producer or connect with their network. Could be an actor who reads your script and go, oh my God, I got to act this part. Let me see how I can find someone. Do you understand? It doesn't have to be necessarily you knocking on the door of a producer or a production company. This is how these things happen. We spread projects through the networks that various people know along the way. The problem is the vast majority of projects are not actually viable. They're not that kind of a page turner screenplay. They're not something that a producer goes, whoa, or that a director actor goes, whoa. Right? Or an investor goes, oh my God, I can see how to make $10 million out of this, $200,000 investment, right? So this is the way to start thinking about this stuff. So how do we create a page turner screenplay? How do we create something that leaps off the page for the reader? First of all, prior to this, we have to have a solid story. We have to take our idea and turn it into a story. But if we're reverse engineering the process, assuming we have a script that's okay, How do we make it extraordinary? Now, there's a couple of little secrets, little tricks along the way. But one thing that you really want to do is you want to make sure that you are writing for the white space of the project. If you've ever seen a screenplay, screenplays are very sparsely written. And this is part of the reason that a lot of beginners flail for so long, because they look at how sparsely written it is. They think, there's not that many words there. I can do that. And then they go out and try to write this thing, which is actually one of the most difficult forms of writing there is, because it has to be clear and succinct and concise. You have to... I came up with this expression somewhere along the way. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Screenwriters write pictures, right? So it's about finding the pictures that express more than just what you've written on the page. On a screenplay, it's sparsely written, so you can't write dense description. Instead, you have to find those few key choice visuals and words that are going to evoke the pictures that fill the reader's mind with meaning and message and point and purpose. So ultimately, what you have to do in a screenplay, one of the secrets to writing a compelling page turner, what I call a fast screenplay, is you basically, on every single page, you've got to make sure there's something on that page that compels the reader to turn the page. That by the end of that page, there is no reason for that reader not to continue, because there's something there that's pulling them through, whether that's some of the choices the character might have made, whether that's the character themselves and the uniqueness of that character, whether that's some element that's happening in the story, maybe some tension that's building, some pacing thing that, oh my God, it's getting more, I got to see how this turns out, and they keep turning the page. Why do we want them to keep turning the page? It's the same thing as when you sit in a theater and you watch a movie. If nothing's happening and it's kind of dull and it's like, okay, what... Who are these people? What do I care? And you start checking your watch. It's boring because the human brain absorbs information relatively quickly. That's why I try to talk kind of fast in these videos, because I'm trying to give you fill your brain with lots of different information so as to keep you interested, to make sure that you don't get bored watching this stuff as I'm trying to convey lots of details and nuggets and pieces of information throughout, right? So it's in your screenplay, you kind of want the same thing. I have this thing on my wall, which is out of frame here, ironically, but it says fill the frame. I'll talk more about it in a future video, but filling the frame it's a cinematography term where when you frame up a picture, you want to make sure that something interesting is throughout the frame. You want to fill the frame, right? So if you're just going to take a picture of me, you don't just want me in front of a white backdrop. Having me in front of a couple of monitors and stuff going on in the back, I'm filling the frame a little bit. Now this is kind of whatever, and now you've seen this so many times if you're watching this along the way that this is no longer interesting. I'm excited about getting out into the world and making the show out on the road at some point. But the principle is the idea of filling this frame. In a screenplay, you want to make sure you fill the frame. Every page has to be dense. It has to keep moving the story forward. It has to keep teaching us, showing us more about our characters. It has to be engaging. There has to be something that's pulling the reader through. Now, that's going to happen largely in your story, which we'll talk about as we start to get into the story development stuff. And it's going to happen through the way you structure out your story, the way you pace it, the way you build the drama, all that kind of stuff. But from a reading standpoint, from what I call the tweak phase, the final polish phase of your screenplay, the whole point, the whole purpose of it is to make sure that every single word in your script is there for a reason. Every single word in your script is there building and pulling the reader through the experience. Every single moment on your screenplay is going to take the reader through and pull them into your process and make them want and need and passionate about knowing more. So that when you start your screenplay, those first couple of pages have drawn them in. Every single page thereafter builds. Every single page thereafter keeps and grows their attention. So that when we build up to the story climax, it becomes something that is surprising to them, something that they didn't see coming, something that's satisfying and fulfilling of the story that they just read, and then gives them the ending and the finality of their story so that when they finish those final words on the page, they go, oh my God, I have to show this to somebody. Oh my God, I want to make this film. That's what you need. That's what you want. And here's the deal. If you create that, everyone you know will want to read your scripts from that point forward and give you notes. So if you're struggling today to get notes and feedback from people, it's probably because the writing itself is not engaging enough to the reader in general. And if it's not engaging enough to the reader in general, it's a chore. You're asking something of them. If you are creating compelling, beautifully told stories on the page, people will be excited about reading your content. If the stories themselves, the underlying stories, are extraordinary, then they're going to be interested to see what you come up with next. And this, by the way, is how you become a professional writer. Is you write your first couple of stories are probably not going to be that. Don't fret. It's okay. We do the best we can as we go with where we are at the time. Once we learn, once we develop, once we continue to move forward, then we develop these skills along the way. We get better and better at this. At a certain point, you're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different projects, all of which are extraordinary, all of which are page turners, all of which are fast screenplays, production-ready screenplays any producer could say yes to. At which point, it's a matter of aligning and finding the producers that are appropriate for the different projects. Does that make sense? So don't think of screenwriting as something that you just sit down once, you have an idea for a movie in your head and you blast it down on the page. Think of it as something that you're going to put in the time and energy and effort to take the 10 ideas that you have in your head and turn them into not just screenplays, but extraordinary, viable, page turner, production ready screenplays. If you can do that, there is a career for you, and you can do that. I can show you exactly how to do that. We'll talk way more about it in this series as we go along. I want to take you along this journey with me, and hopefully you'll see how it all works. So, to bring it back, the final phase of the process is the payoff phase. It's where we connect with the producer once you have an aligned production-ready screenplay. Prior to that, you have to align your screenplay. You have to make sure that it lands the way you want it to land and make sure that it's aligned with some producer, or figure out how to align it with a producer, or at least you have to bridge that gap. In order to have that, we need to make sure that the screenplay that you've written is an extraordinary, compelling page-turner screenplay. That you've written for the white space, you've created an easy read for the reader that's going to pull their eye down the page, and at the end of every page, give them a reason to turn to the next page. And it's going to be written in a terse, concise, tangible, visceral, visual style, something that's compelling and something that's present tense, something that's pulling them forward through the story. We'll talk about a lot of that stuff later on as we go. And prior to that, we need to make sure that we've turned your story into something that's actually solid. So what we're going to talk about tomorrow is the rewrite process. What we're going to talk about tomorrow is, if we're continuing the reverse engineering thing, when you have an idea and you spit it out onto the page, it doesn't come out of your head fully formed. It comes out of your head a bit mangled and a bit messy. And this is the beauty of writing, is that if it comes out a bit mangled and messy, you can go ahead and go back and change it. You can rewrite. The old adage is that all writing is rewriting. I agree with that completely, and that's why I developed the most comprehensive approach to screenwriting ever, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So today, here's the daily prompt for you. I want you to look over the work that you've written so far. If you have been writing for any length of time, pull out an old script. I want you to think of this as a reader. Think of this as someone who's experiencing your story. Whether you've sent it out for notes or not, that's for another day. I want you to look at the work that you've written. Be objective about it. How compelling is it? Is there a need at the end of page 1 to turn that page? I mean, you know it, you like the story. Try to see it from the viewpoint of someone who doesn't know the story. Is it clear? Do we know what's going on? Is there a reason to care at the end of page 1? Is there a reason to turn the page? How fast does it read? Is it a quick read, or did you have to stumble over any single sentence to try to figure out, wait, what's going on here again? Oh, that's right. I meant that. That's the kind of thing that's going to kill you and make it hard to get good feedback and make it hard for anyone to want to read the script or connect with the script. Make sense? So if you don't have that, if you're newer to this, maybe you're just starting out, what I want you to do today is I want you to basically look at writing that's out there in the world. Go try to find free scripts online, have a look at what they look like, read the first page, read the second page. Ask yourself, is this grabbing me? Is this pulling me into the story? Is this is this a quick read, or is this something that I'm having to figure out as we go along? By the way, not all professional screenplays you're going to find online are good examples of screenwriting. They're not all representative of the kind of thing you should write. So I'll make an episode about that at some point in the future, because I think that's a really important point that a lot of writers get hung up on. Well, if it exists out there in the world, that must be an example of how I should write. Not the case at all for a number of reasons. But if you have a look at them for the purpose of today's daily prompts, have a look at them and see if they're compelling to you. See if there's something that pulls you through and makes you want to continue. Particularly if it's a movie that you haven't seen before. Is it something that grips you and pulls you in right away? Because that ultimately is the initial sign. What we want to do as screenwriters is, before we ever send our work out into the world, we want to make sure that screenplay is a compelling page turner screenplay, what I call a fast screenplay, something that's going to read very, very fast, because that's the thing that's going to draw someone in, get them passionate about your project, and be interested in moving it forward. So if you have, again, any questions at all, pop them into the comments. If you disagree with anything, send me love, send me hate. It's all good. But whatever you do, click the little subscribe button, click the little bell notification to make sure that you get notified when new episodes come up. But hint, spoiler alert, they come up every single day. So come back and join me tomorrow after you have stopped. At the end of this video, stopped. Don't watch the next thing. Don't go binge watch something else that I've made. Stop, process, filter through your own point of view. Think about it from your perspective. Take action. 10 minutes, 1 hour, 10 hours, whatever you can afford, but take some action today, please. We'll see you tomorrow.